So like I said, I am using one of the newer versions of Excel. Now notice how sometimes I'll make my mouse do that so you can find my mouse that way. So notice how I do have the Power Pivot menu up on my menu bar. So if you don't have the word Power Pivot there, let me show you how you turn that on. So we'll pick on the File menu, and then under File, I'll pick on Options, File, and then Options. And this is the way you can customize your version of Excel on your computer. First, you're going to enable the add-in. So I'll pick on the word add-ins there. And then once we pick on the add-in, you come down here and you click on this pull down and you say COM add-ins. See it? COM add-ins. And then we'll pick on go. And you make sure it is checked where it says Power Pivot. So that would be the first step. Usually that's all you have to do. And when you check that box and click on OK, then you'll see the Power Pivot menu up there. Now, if it still isn't there, then you might have to do this additional step. I'm going to go back into the options. So I'll pick on File and then Options. And this time I'll go over to where it says Customize Ribbon. Now remember, the ribbon is a new word for the toolbar. So I'll pick on Customize Ribbon and then make sure the word Power Pivot is checked there. So if you do both of those steps, then when you click on OK, then we should see the Power Pivot menu choice. Okay, now let's take a look at this data. In order to make the Power Pivot work, your data has to be what we call a formatted table. This is what we call a formatted table. Now, if your data is not a formatted table, here's how you can make it so it is. You click on one cell within your block of data. Just pick on one cell. Then you pick on the Home menu, Home. We come over here and we say Format as a Table. And then you pick one of your styles. Now, all the styles work the same way. It's just a matter of how you want to see it. So I usually go with this one over here. So every other row will be that shade of color. So I will click on my style. Now, if it's the first time you're doing it, you would see a window in the middle of the screen, and you would make sure you check the box that says my table has headers, and then click on OK. So now this is a formatted table. If I pick, now I would also give the table a name. So the sheet has a name down here, but I also give the table a name because the table name is actually what gets used in the Power Pivot. So I'll pick on the design menu. And then I'll pick, so let me see if we have a question over here. So hold on for a second. And Joe, did you have a question? I'm going to turn your microphone on, Joe. So Joe, if you can hear me.
Tom, this is Joe.
Yes.
Question, is this webinar being recorded?
It is being recorded, and I know that the past couple of weeks were recorded also. Over this weekend, I'll make sure that they all get up on the website, but this one is getting recorded.
Okay. I'll unmute. How do we do that?
So I'm going to unmute you from this side, but you can hear me and the screen looks good?
Yep, we're good. Thanks a lot. That's all.
Thank you so much, Joe. Okay. Yeah, everybody, feel free to raise your hand if you have a question, or we'll have question and answers at the end as well. So, and the sessions are going to be recorded. I have to catch up with the previous weeks. It's been a busy time, so I'll make sure I get those up during the weekend. Okay, so now this table is, this data is now a formatted table. I would also give the table a name. So I'll pick on the design menu. And then over here, it might say table 1. So I'll come up there and I'll type in the word customers, and now that table has a name. I would do the same thing on sheet 2. So I'll pick on the orders table. So this is a formatted table. So again, if your data is not a formatted table, you have to make it like that so it'll work with the Power Pivot. I'm going to click on one cell that's not blank. I'll pick on the Home menu, and then we'll pick on Format as a Table. Now, you don't have to pick the same style as the other one, but usually I'll go with the same one, which is here. Now, again, if it's the first time you're doing it for this sheet, you would see a window in the middle of the window that says, my table has headers, and you would click that and then click on OK. And you can see here on row 1, we do have the headers there. Now I would give this table a better name. So I'll pick on the design menu, and then those over here, it says orders. So the two sheets now are formatted as a table, and the two sheets have a better table name up there on the design menu. Now, one of the big benefits of the Power Pivot is that we can make the pivot table from more than one sheet. Here we have the customer sheet. This shows a list of all the customers. Now on this sheet, we have the customer ID field. And notice how they're all different. We can call that a unique identifier, or you can use the word primary key. They're all different. Now I have the order sheet, and this shows all of the orders from those customers. And this one has a common field that's called customer ID. So to make this work, the two sheets have to have a common field. Here we see customer ID. Now notice on the order sheet, they're not all different. Here is one on row 4, and row 7 has the same customer ID. One customer can have multiple orders. We call that a one-to-many relationship. One customer can have many orders. Right? We say one-to-many. So that's why they don't have to be different on the order sheet. What we want to do is we want to make a relationship between these two sheets. So let's make a relationship. So this is going to be a new feature that started in Excel 2013. I'll pick on the data menu up top, of course, data. And then on the data menu, we'll look for this icon. Now yours will probably said the word relationships, but it's going to be the icon with the 3 boxes there. And then it always takes a second for this window to come up. And here it comes. Okay, good. Now I'm going to delete the one I made in the previous session. All right. So if you notice on this window, I picked on the relationship icon right there to get this window. I'll pick on the word new. So you're going to use the screen to tell Excel what the common field is. So over here, I'll click on the pull down where it says table. You see, this is why we gave it a better name. Now I must have made these other tables in previous sessions, but we'll pick on the orders table right there. So that's using the table name, not the sheet name. So that's why I give the table a better name. Now I'll come over here, and these are the fields for the orders table. And we'll choose the common field, customer ID. Good. Now, see where it says related table? Again, this is why I gave the table a better name. So I'll pick on customers, and we'll use the common field, customer ID. So we have orders and customer ID, and then customers and customer ID. So when you do this in real life, sometimes the field name is not the same, and it doesn't have to be the same. As long as the data is the same, that's more important. So maybe here it might say customer ID, here it might say customer number. As long as the data is the same, that's more important. It's always nice when the field name is the same, but it doesn't always happen that way in real life. So I'll click on OK. Now we see that that relationship has been created. Now, if I had more data, like if I had another sheet, I could make another relationship. You could really have as many as you wanted to. In real life, I once made a model with 10 different relationships, and you could have as many as you wanted to. You would look for the common fields. So I'll click on Close there. Now I'm going to save that. So far, the two sheets have a common field. We told it what the common field was with the relationships. And then the two sheets are formatted as a table, and I gave the table a better name. Now we're going to start the Power Pivot. So here's what I'm trying to do. I have a list of all the customers on the customers sheet, and I have a list of the related orders on the order sheet. So I want to make a pivot table that's going to pick fields from both of those sheets. It's going to know which customer goes with which orders because of that relationship. So let's start the Power Pivot. It really starts off as a normal pivot table. So I'll pick on one cell that's not blank. Now, it actually doesn't matter which sheet that I'm on right now, as long as I click on a cell within one of the formatted tables. I'll pick on the Insert menu up top, Insert. For those of you coming on right now, welcome to the webinar. I did have a power outage about 15 minutes ago. So if that happens again, if the screen goes blank or whatever, just give it a few minutes and I'll get back onto a different computer. But so far, I think we're going to be fine. So I'll pick on Insert and I'll pick on Pivot Table. Good. Now notice over here it has the table name. So again, that's why we gave the table a better name for this window. If I was on the customers sheet, it would have said customers there, but either way is fine. Now, look down here. This starts the PowerPivot. Add the data to the data model. The data model is the thing that will allow us to make the pivot table for more than one sheet. So that's a pivotal step right there. I'm going to click on OK. Now we're on a pivot table sheet. It looks like a normal pivot table except for one big change. I'm going to come over here and we'll pick on the word all. Good. Now we'll be able to pick the fields from the various tables. So I'm going to expand the customers table. That word all there was really critical. So I'll pick on customers and I'll pull company name down here into the rows. So I'm just going to drag that. Notice over here on the left, each company name became a different row. All right, so that field came from the customers table. So watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to come over here to the right. We're going to scroll down, and now I'll pick some fields for the orders table. Some of these other tables I might have used in a different session, so don't worry about those. But I'm going to go ahead and expand the orders table. And then we can see how I can use the fields from the orders table as well. So I'm going to pick up order amount and drag it into the values like that. So now it has a sum of all the orders for each different customer. It knows which customer goes with which order because of that relationship. So let's think about what we're looking at. We'll go back to the customer sheet. See, the customer sheet has the customer name and address, but it doesn't have anything about the order amount. If I go to the order sheet, then it has the customer ID, and then over here it has information about the order, including the order amount over on the right. So I just made a pivot table. This field came from the customer sheet. This field came from the order sheet. It gave us a sum of all the orders for each customer and knows which customers goes with which order because of that relationship. So this is really a big deal because really for the first time, Excel becomes a relational database, a lot like Access already is. Now let's get the count, how many orders did each customer make? So the PowerPivot has elements of the normal pivot table. So I'll pick up order amount from the fields and drag it down here into the values again. Now I have two sums. Well, I don't need two sums. That will be redundant. Plus it'd be repetitious. So I'd like to change that. So look where I am. I'm going to click on the second sum over here. See the second sum? I'm going to click there. The really important choice here would be the value field settings. And I'll pick on the word count. So I have different mathematical operations there. We'll do a count. Pretty soon I'll show you with the PowerPivot, you get even more than that. So I'm going to change the custom name here. The custom name will be the title of that field over here in the pivot table. So I'll click on OK. Now I have a sum and a count, right? So I can start to get great information. So this is really telling us that this customer had 6 orders and they totaled to be that number there. Now maybe for this one, I'd like to change the title of that column to the word sum. The official way to do that is to come over here and click on the pull down where it says sum in the value section, and I'll pick on value field settings, and up there on the custom name, I'll type in the word sum. Good. Now I have a sum and a count of the orders for each different customer. So think about it. This field came from the customer sheet. These two fields came from the orders sheet. Now, like I said, the PowerPivot has elements of a normal pivot table. So let's add something that's called a slicer. So I'm going to pick on the pivot table, and then you get 2 extra menus up top. You get Analyze and you get Design. But you only get those 2 menus when you click on the pivot table. So I'll pick on Analyze, and we'll do Insert Slicer. Insert Slicer is right there. Good. Now your slicers are made up of your fields, and I can choose the fields from either table. So let's pick on country from the customers table. And now we have a list of the countries. Watch what the slicer does. So if I pick on Belgium, it'll just show the items from Belgium. Or if I pick on Canada, it just shows the customers from Canada, okay? Now, if I want to pick more than one of those, I'm going to hold down my control key on my keyboard. So I'll pick on Austria, then I'm going to hold down the control key and I'll pick on Brazil and Canada. Now I have the ones from all those different countries. Now, to make this more meaningful, it'll be really helpful if I can show the country on the pivot table, although it's not necessary. But I think it'll be more meaningful if I do. So I'm going to come over here to the fields, go back to where the fields for the customers table appear, and then I'll pick up country. Now watch where I'm going to drag that. I'm going to drag that into the rows, but I'm going to make sure it's above the company name. You see where I am? Right there. And now see, now that I see Austria and then Brazil and Canada, and now it makes more sense. So if I pick on Finland, it only shows the ones for Finland on the slicer. So if I want to show more than one, I'm going to hold down my control key, then I'll pick on Belgium and Canada and so on. So the slicer is a part of the PowerPivot because it's part of the pivot table. Now, what we're really making here is a dashboard, but I really like the fact that I can pull those from the multiple tables because of that relationship. Then another great feature of the dashboard is called the timeline. So I'll pick on the Analyze menu. I'll say Insert Timeline. In this case, the timeline will be based on a date field. So we can do a date range. This is going to come from the orders table. So I'll pick on order date. See, the customers table didn't have anything about the date, but the orders table does. So it has the order date. This is a timeline. Now, notice how it's organized by month. But I'm going to click on this pull down where it says month, and I'll pick on year. And now it's organized by year. And I'll pick on 1998. So think about what it's showing me. It's showing me all the records from 1998 from these countries. I mean, I can really get very specific here and show the exact records that I'm looking for. So I know Jim is on, and Jim deals with space type of data and rocket. He actually deals with rocket scientists. So this could be any kind of data, but the pivot table can help you analyze any kind of data, and the PowerPivot is where we can pull the data from multiple sources. Really powerful stuff. This is all part of what we call a dashboard. So to get all the records back again, I'm going to click on this X right here, and I'll pick on this X. Good. So you can start to see these are great components of the PowerPivot. This one came from the orders table. Okay. Now, another great component of the PowerPivot is something that's called a measure, which means we can really add more formulas and functions that you've never seen before. Let's say for each different company, I want to see the first time that they made an order. I want to see the first order date. So I'm just moving these over to the side. Now notice how we have that PowerPivot menu that I turned on before. Click on PowerPivot. A new calculation here will be called a measure. And the reason I want to show you this, you're going to find some functions that you've never seen before because of the PowerPivot. So I'll pick on the word measure, and I'll say new measure. Okay. Give it a second. Now the table, this time it's going to come from the orders table. After a while, of course, you get to know your data. And I'm going to call this one, let's say oldest order date. Now the description is optional. So I'll pick on the FX. Now I'm sure you recognize the FX. That's how we would build a function in normal Excel. But we'll do the FX. You're going to see some functions here that you've never seen before. They're only available within the PowerPivot. So I'm going to click on this pull down to pick a category, and I pick on date and time. Right away, like you've never seen closing balance month and closing balance year and all that. So I'm going to scroll down. 8 diff is a really go in. Let's do first date, and that'll be the earliest date. So we'll click on OK. Now I'm going to click inside of that parentheses, and you start to type in your field name. So I'll type in O, and then it'll show the ones that start with O, and I'll double click on order date. And I'll close the parentheses. Now that formula can be very simple, like this one, or it could be very complicated, as complicated as you would need. But you know, this first date function, it doesn't exist anywhere else except for this PowerPivot. So I'll make a date format over here, and we'll use the United States date format. Good. So I'll click on OK. I'll do another measure for you so you can see the steps again. And now for each different company, I have the first time that they made an order, right? So let's see how we made a measure again. So I'll pick on the PowerPivot menu that we turned on, and I'll pick on measure, and we'll do another new measure. So this one's also going to come from the orders table, and I'll call this one newest order date. And the description is optional. I'll pick on the FX, and I'll go back to the date and time category. We'll scroll down, and we see one that's called last date. That would be the most recent date. I'm going to click inside of that parentheses, and I'll type in O because I want to use the order date. Double click there, and I'll close the parentheses. Now this formula can be much more complicated, of course. Again, I'll use the US date format. If you look at that pull down, you'll see many other date formats, like this is the European format and so on. You have lots of choices here. I'll pick on OK. Now it says I already have a field name called newest order date, maybe from a previous session. So I'll call it the newest order date number 2. You know, that'll be fine. Pick on OK. So now I have the oldest order date for each customer, and I have the newest order date. So another benefit of the PowerPivot is you get the PowerPivot menu, and you can make these measures from which you can do a lot of calculations you really can't get through in any other format within Excel. Now, another great benefit of the PowerPivot is something that's called a KPI. KPI means Key Performance Indicator. It's actually a visual tool. I'd like to show you how to make a KPI. Now, it's kind of weird. A KPI has to come from a measure. So even though I have the sum here, I did that the normal way, I'm going to make another sum that will be a measure so I can then make that into a KPI. So look, I'll pick on measure again. I'll do new measure, and I'll call this one, let's call it the new sum. Now, I probably have one that's called new sum already from a previous class, so I'll put in new sum for 1008. Okay. Now, the normal functions are going to be in here. So if I scroll down after I pick on the FX, we see that a lot of the normal ones are in there, including sum. And then I'll type in O within the parentheses so I can see the order amount. And then we'll make this currency format. I use 0 decimal places because many times in the pivot table, we don't really care too much about the pennies. Although, you know, on a scientific situation, of course, you would have many different decimal places there, but we'll make it 0. Click on OK. So now I have a new sum. Notice how it's the same number that's in this column. So actually, I don't need that sum anymore. I'm going to pick up this sum from the values and just drag it back to the top. Now I just have the sum that we made. Now, watch how we're going to make a KPI. It's going to be a visual tool, really nice tool here. So I'll pick on the PowerPivot, and I'll pick on KPI, which means Key Performance Indicator, and I'll say New KPI. You see, when I click on this pull down, the KPI has to come from a measure. These are ones that may be done in the previous session. So let's find the one that we just made. Now let me take a look at these numbers here. Okay, so let's say if it's less than $5,000, we want those to be in red. If it's between 5 and 10, we'll make those yellow, and above 10, we'll make it green. So I'm going to come over here. Now I could compare it to another measure. That one's asking for a different measure, but in this case, I'll go with the absolute value, and I'll type in 10,000 as my base. Now I'm going to click here, and you see that these numbers adjusted. So watch what I'm doing. I'm going to move this to 5,000, or you can type in the number there. And I'm going to move this one to 10,000. So 5,000 and less will be red. Between 5 and 10 will be yellow. Above 10 will be green. And you can pick different formats for that. So I'm going to click on OK. We're going to make another measure so I can show that again, another KPI. Now, this is kind of weird the way it shows up. I'm going to come over here to my fields. Sometimes it turns on automatically, but this one will turn on. So I'm going to go to the orders table and expand that. The measures and the KPIs appear down here at the bottom. There it is. So I'm going to expand that KPI, and I'll pick in the word status, and look what happened. The ones that are red are less than 5,000. Green is above 10,000, and then the yellow is between 5 and 10. So let's try those steps again. Let me make another new, I'll make another new measure. So I'll do measure, new measure. I'll call this one new count, for today's date. And then we'll do the FX. And again, you have your normal, a lot of the normal functions are in there. As well as many new ones. So we'll do count. I'm going to click inside there and I'll type in O so we can, it doesn't really matter which field that I count. And we'll just make that normal number format. So now I have the new count. Let's make a KPI out of that. So watch the KPI again. I'll pick on PowerPivot and then KPI and then new KPI. This time I'll call it, see how it has to come from one of those measures. So we'll use this measure. Then, now these numbers will be much lower. So I'll say 10 there will be the base. So let's say 10 and let's say 5, let's say, we'll do 5 and below will be red. 5 and 10 will be yellow, and above 10 will be green. Now, this one turned on. Now, look how it shows up. When it first shows up, it has the zeros and the ones there. So this is kind of weird to me. I'm going to come over here to the fields. There's the new count KPI. I'm going to uncheck status and then check status again. And now when it appears this time, it has the KPI. It has the what we're looking for there. So watch how all this works together. I'm just going to start wrapping up. Those are the things I want to show you with the new PowerPivot tools. So look, everything is working together now. So I'll pick on Brazil. It just shows the one with Brazil. We see the KPIs are updated. Canada. I mean, this is what we call a dashboard. People will love this back at work. It's easy to use. It's very visual. You get instant results. And this can be worked with any kind of data. Everything is working together. This is what we call a dashboard. So one of the benefits of the PowerPivot is we can make the pivot table for more than one table. As long as you can find a common field, you can make that relationship. Then another benefit of the PowerPivot, it has all the other benefits of the normal pivot table, like the slicer and the timeline. But then we can also add those new measures where you'll find a lot more calculations that you can't find anywhere else. And then we have the KPIs as well. So let's see, I do have a couple questions there in the chat area. So Joe says, are you limited to only 3 KPIs? Let's take another look at that. I know what he's asking about. So let's make another one. So I'll pick on the PowerPivot menu and I'll pick on KPI and I'll do a new KPI. So I'm going to call this one, let's call it, well, that'll come from the, oh, I see. We're going to change the one that we made. So instead of making a new one, I'm going to manage the other one. Good. And we're going to manage the one that's called the new sum. And we'll pick on edit. So if I look at this one has 5 different categories. Or actually, if I choose one of these, you see where my mouse is? that one will have the 5 categories as well. So you can have up to 5 different ranges. All right, so we can see how that's going to work. This one also has 5. That one has a lot more actually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, so that one has up to 8 different ranges. You can see how we have like the, the empty or the half and the quarter and so on. So if you pick these different styles, especially this one, then you have, this one has up to 8 ranges. All right.